Hello everyone, I'm Chris from Learn British English Free on YouTube and Google+. The point of this lesson is to give you a range of vocabulary when we want to describe specific quantities. In these examples we know how many of something that we have, and we have a few bits of vocabulary for certain quantities which you will hear every now and again. So I'll try to explain them and also the context or examples in which you're likely to hear them and use them. The context is important with these as we don't use them interchangeably for the number every time. I've written them in the description. Please have a look if you want to. Let's start with one. So if we have one of something, we sometimes refer to it as single or a single, especially a person if they are not in a relationship, they don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend, they're a single person. There are often events called singles nights for people who want to meet others. But we can use it when we're talking about a quantity of one. For example, I'll have a single pint at the pub. I'll have one pint to drink. And especially travelling, a single ticket. That means that you go one way and you don't want to come back, at least at that time. I'll have a single to London King's Cross. I'll have a single to Birmingham. It means that you're buying the ticket to go for the one trip one way and not to come back, not a return. If we have two of something, we have two words, pair. Again, the best examples for these are when we're talking about people. So when people are in a relationship this time, you often can hear them referred to as a pair. We also say a pair of socks, for example, and a bit confusing, but a pair of trousers. So if we say a pair of trousers, it actually means one item of clothing, but for some reason we call that a pair, so that's a bit confusing. Also a couple. Again, it's very usual to hear two people in a relationship called a couple. Even if they're married, they're a married couple. But we use it for other things as well. And the thing about this is that people often get confused and they think it refers to a range of numbers, might be like the same as a few, but it's not. It always means two. So it might be that I've got a couple of pieces of work to do this morning, or I've got a couple of people to see this weekend. Always means two. When we have three of something, you will sometimes hear the word trio used. It's not very common, this one, but again, it can be used as a synonym for three. So I looked at an example saying the hotel is run by a trio of brothers. It can be basically interchangeable when we have three of something, but it's not very common, that one. Now we get into a pattern, if you like, starting with 6, half a dozen. So the main point here is that 12 of something is called a dozen. So 6 is half of that, half a dozen. Half a dozen eggs. You often get a pack of 6 eggs. They'll normally be referred to as half a dozen eggs rather than 6 simply. Then we're on to 12, and as I just said, 12 is often described as a dozen of something. So like before, it could be a dozen eggs. That means you have a box of 12 eggs. Also a dozen rolls, things like that. If you think about a court case, when someone goes to court, they have been accused of a crime, there is something called a jury, a group of people who must decide. There are 12 people, so you can say the jury consists of a dozen people. For 13, again, this one's a bit unusual, and it's linked to the previous two ones as well. A baker's dozen. So I assume this must be a particular quantity that bakers use. They like to bake 13 of things, possibly. That's my guess. And so 13 is called a baker's dozen. That one, however, is quite unusual. 20. A score. We refer to a quantity of 20 things sometimes as a score. And to go a bit more advanced, they sometimes use like they combine it with other numbers as well. For example, 4 score, that can mean 80. 4 times score, 4 times 20, can mean 80 of something, that kind of thing. So the numbers as well can be manipulated. As in 24, 2 dozen. We spoke before about half a dozen, a baker's dozen. So remember 12 is often described as a dozen. 2 dozen is 24. Again, that can be used to describe basically anything. 100. There are 2 words for this one I wanted to tell you about in case you didn't know. The first is a century. You probably know that years are counted like that. 100 years is referred to as a century. We are in the 21st century right now. But also in a sport called cricket, which is popular in England, a century of runs. When the batsman scores 100 runs, it's described as a century. And another word is a ton. And the only example I can think of with this is cricket again. So you will hear that vocabulary used every now and again, a ton. If the batsman scores a ton, it means 100 runs as well. But a century is quite commonly used to describe a quantity of 100 again. Finally, 1,000. And it's one of my favourite British words for this, a grand. And we're talking specifically about money. If I have £1,000, I can say I have a grand. If I have 2,000, I can say I have 2 grand. And the main point is that we don't add an S to the word if we have it in the plural. So it's 2 grand, not 2 grands. And that's the same however much you have. You could say that if the house costs £250,000, I could say it costs 250 grand. But no S at the end. All right, that concludes my list of vocabulary for specific quantities. Please have a look in the description for the vocab if you want to. I hope it was helpful. Please do leave comments, feedback or questions if something isn't clear. I try to respond as much as I can, and I hope that the examples were useful enough. Thank you as always for watching. Also a big thanks at this time because my YouTube channel Learn British English Free has recently surpassed 1 million views in total. That's a big number and I'm very happy about it, so thanks to everyone for watching. But please do subscribe if you haven't already and keep checking the channel because I will be posting more lessons in the future on YouTube and Google+. We also have the British English page on Facebook, Learn British English on Tumblr, and the main website is www.learnbritishenglish.co.uk. Please do check out those websites and share them with your colleagues and friends if you want to, if other people want to join us and learn. But thanks once more for your time. I will see you soon. Bye for now.